This episode in our series is titled Italy's Fascist UFO Files. If these documents from the Mussolini era are authentic, and the research so far shows they are, then the history of official ufology doesn't begin in America in the late 40s, but in Italy in the 30s. It is important to point out that these were the original papers and not photocopies or photos of the documents. That means that forensic analysis of the paper, ink, and aging process can be conducted, which cannot be done with copies. According to a thorough investigation conducted by Antonio Garavaglia, a forensic expert accredited with the Italian Ministry of Justice, they are authentic. I myself met Garavaglia at the San Marino UFO Symposium in 2000, where he told me in an interview, quote, "Listen, I'm not a UFO expert, and I can only comment about these specific documents which I myself analyze, and I have to tell you, they are authentic," end quote. Additional research done by Andrea Bedetti, a historian and expert on Italy's fascist era, found that the stationery, aeronautical terminology, and vocabulary were all consistent with real documents from the period. As sightings of objects referred in the documents as, quote, unconventional flying vehicles, end quote, were reported throughout Italy, the fascist regime created a secret committee to investigate and cover up these incidents. The committee was known as Cabinet RS-33 and was led by Italy's top scientist, the renowned inventor Guglielmo Marconi, until his death in 1937. The unraveling of this fascinating story began in the mid-90s when the famous Italian ufologist and author Roberto Pinotti received a series of documents on stationery bearing the seal of the Kingdom's Senate and Agenzia Stefani, the regime news agency in charge of disseminating fascist propaganda.
As for flying saucers, the military admits it has built these unmanned craft. It may not be a coincidence that the Air Force's only unmanned aerial vehicle squadron is based at Nellis. Whatever is flying around out there still attracts visitors from all over the world.
It's still newsworthy in Europe?
Yes. No, also in Europe, Area 51 is well known.
Okay, cool, thanks. And then I'll sneak in one more real quick. Right after that, my research partner, good friend Michael, and I hopped into a space in here with an Italian researcher, and my buddy and I have been digging really, really deep into the Magenta 1933 story that kind of broke with David Grush. And one thing that this researcher told us was that J.D. Vance went on vacation to Italy recently, and that he actually went there to be briefed on this subject and sort of the history of, possibly Magenta and the Italian UFO stories in general. So I was wondering if you knew anything about that, and if Magenta is on your radar, the Seoul conference in Italy in October and all that.
I mean, I haven't been invited to the Seoul conference, but I am very much aware of the Magenta event and the narrative behind that, and I find it intriguing, and I would love to someday make contact with the Vatican, and hopefully talk with some people that are or get access to the Vatican archives. I think that would be really fascinating.
Cool. Yeah, somebody who's
appreciate that, man.
Yeah, we do know somebody who is going to be there soon, so we'll let you know.
The story of the so-called fascist files began in 1997. We received from an unknown source. This guy said he was a relative of a man who had taken part in a committee during the fascist era for the study of UFOs. Of course, at that time, UFOs were not called so. The name the regime chose for them was unconventional flying vehicles. And this commission, headed by Guglielmo Marconi, was built up by Mussolini only because he thought that these new flying devices might be simply a new technical means of any other European country, that is England, France, Germany. And so the purpose of this group was just to study and to copy the technology of these new aerial vehicles.
One of the documents from 1936 was a report from a secret agent using the name of Andrea, Andrew in Italian, who wrote, quote, "It was sighted in the morning of Monday. It was a metallic disc, polished and reflecting light, with a length of 10 or 12 meters. 2 fighters from a near base took off, but were not able to reach it, even at 130 kilometers per hour. It didn't emit sound. It has arrived to the hands of Ciano." Count Ciano was Mussolini's son-in-law and Italy's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Andrea's report adds that after passing over Mestre, it was seen as a sort of metallic gray tube, and that one witness described it, quote, like a kind of aerial torpedo with very clear windows and alternating white and red lights, end quote. The document mentioned the prefecture opened an inquiry and that the Duce, Mussolini, has expressed his worries because he says that if it were a matter of real English or French aircraft, his foreign policy would have to start all over again. As you can see, the contents of Andrea's report are sensational. They describe a classic flying saucer daytime incident with aircraft scramble and multiple witnesses in 1936. It also discloses that Mussolini and Ciano, Italy's number 1 and 2 leaders, were informed right away. One of the most interesting facets of the fascist UFO files was the alleged creation of the top-secret cabinet RS-33, led by Marconi, which included some of Italy's most prominent astronomers, scientists, and aeronautical engineers. Professor Filippo Bottazzi was an important member of the cabinet. He was a top physiologist who studied mediumistic phenomena at the turn of the 20th century and had known the astronomer Schiaparelli, discoverer of the famous canals of Mars.
And there have been other Russian officials that come out and say, yeah, we've got people studying the UFO questions. So, no doubt that these incidents have happened all over the world.
All over the world. You have a Russian general, Vasily Alexeyev, coming out in a German magazine in 2000 saying this stuff. And then the one of my favorite ones is there's Marconi, this radio engineer, famous radio engineer. So he is rumored to be part of, this Majestic 12 equivalent, quote unquote, in Italy called the RS-33. I don't know if you remember this. I met you briefly at the San Marino event, which is this global UFO conference held there in Italy. And so you have Roberto Pinotti and other guys, Paolo Guzzardi, who do research on this out there. And Marconi's grandson, in an interview that's everybody can see the video of this. He's speaking to Ogo magazine, which is, I guess, their People magazine equivalent. So it's sort of a gossip magazine. But he says, yeah, my grandfather had a lot to do with the UFO and ET issue. He's a part of this select committee with, why am I blanking on the
Mussolini?
Yeah, there you go. He was part of a select committee with Mussolini to study this stuff. And so it's just fascinating.
This was the Magenta crash, Magenta, Italy.
In 1933.
You mentioned Roberto Pinotti. He just finished a book about the Magenta crash and shows documentation that, it really did happen. Marconi, who invented radio, was assigned by Mussolini to head up the group that would investigate this and study the craft, etc. And that craft it's reasonable to see where that craft was taken to Germany, to Nazi Germany, where studies were done with that craft. In fact, Werner von Braun, who we know was later taken under, taken back to the U.S. after World War II under Operation Paperclip, right? And he worked on the Apollo program. He knew a lot of the astronauts. used to have astronauts over to his house on weekends for barbecues. And in fact, Gordon
Cooper?
Gordon Cooper wrote a book. And in that book, he talks about von Braun telling him that they actually worked on UFO craft in Germany, in Nazi Germany.
Wow.
And actually had a flying model.
That is fascinating. I didn't know that Gordon Cooper wrote that. That's really amazing.
Absolutely. And
wow, I got to check that out. That's wild.
Yeah, you get a hold of his book. I forgot the name of the book, but he did write it in there. So chances are, the back engineering of UFOs goes way back.
That is fascinating. Gordon Cooper is no scrub. He spent more time in orbit than anybody before him as an astronaut as part of the Mercury missions.
Right.
These were before the Apollo missions. That's amazing. I didn't know that. I got to research. That's fascinating.
Look into it.
I will. Yeah, because Wernher von Braun pops up in these stories. Edgar Mitchell says that he, comes to him and says, he has knowledge of this stuff. And apparently he was involved in Edgar Mitchell actually doing these sort of remote viewing parapsychology experiments, in space and stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's tangential there, all these anecdotes, but that's maybe the most interesting anecdote of them all, that he said he was directly involved in reverse engineering craft.
Right.
Fascinating.
In fact, other of the paperclip scientists from Nazi Germany confirmed this. Again, during these weekend meetings with some of the astronauts.
Well, Wernher von Braun's mentor is a guy named Hermann Oberth. And Hermann Oberth is on video speculating about UFOs. He says, the existence of UFOs should make anybody question reality. And then he talks about, time manipulation involved in UFO travel. And he was openly very interested in this stuff. So, and then he actually, as part of Paperclip, comes to the U.S. to work as part of Convair Bell as well. So, yeah.
I want to ask you two more things. One has to do with my friends Craig Oliver and Michael Armentor's investigation into the Magenta crash and everything they've been investigating with Alan Dulles and all of these people that had been involved with CIA in the past. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's still a latent connection between all of that happened back then and potentially even Nazis being involved in all of this stuff still?
Well, that's something that I speculated on, and that was part of my 74 slide deck. If you recall, I put that in there primarily because, again, it made sense to me that, and I didn't know about Magenta when I created those slides back in, actually I started them in 2016 and had them and did not publicly, at least in social media, reveal those slides. And then in 2020, when Danny Sheehan said he talked to a former chief of electronic intelligence, CIA, so forth and so on, then I had to go back to those old slides, which were then 4 years old, and update them with everything. And so what you saw on Project Unity as that slide presentation, and I've given that slide presentation in person at various conferences, particularly MUFON. What you saw there was me adding more information, and part of that information was the Nazi involvement of the Nazi quest to find these artifacts, which they considered to have some sort of magical powers, I guess. We're talking about the chalice. We're talking about the sword of destiny, the Holy Grail, and so forth. They were looking for things,
artifacts.
Yes, and this happened in the mid-30s. I think this unit, the Uninterby, were created. You can look it up in Wikipedia. But before that, I did not know about Magenta. But now it makes sense to me that if Mussolini knew about the Magenta craft, would it not make sense that Hitler would know about the Magenta craft? That the Italian fascists and the and the German Nazis would also know about that craft. And thinking of the engineering expertise of the Germans, that they would they not then take that craft and exploit it in certain ways? What can they get out of it? And perhaps there was some knowledge about how that craft worked, or anything about that craft that may have been transferred when the Italians lost the war in 1944. Did that craft then get transferred to the United States? And was there further work done? And after the war, it's a known fact that there were 600 rocket scientists, but aside from the 600, there were like 1,000 Nazis brought over by CIA.
Paperclip.
The part of Paperclip no one talks about is the fact that there were diehard, hardcore Nazis working for the United States government, and they were sent back to Europe to penetrate the Soviet Union, the Eastern Bloc, the Warsaw Pact nations, because they had expertise in working in that area. But they were working for CIA. And then there's speculation that some Nazis were able to escape through certain means and ended up in friendly Latin American governments. I think of Argentina particularly.
Chile, Paraguay.
Yeah, those countries. And were they, with this technology and with the CIA knowledge of them, were further developments made, so that the Roswell craft may have been a combination of American know-how, German know-how, inspired by NHI technology from Magenta. And that's why it crashed, because it's not an advanced vehicle. I find it amusing that people think a radar can knock down any of these craft because they don't understand radar. They don't understand how radar works. Radar is not directed energy.
Yeah.
It's not. It's pulsed energy. It's coherent pulsed energy, but it's not really directed in the sense that it's high powered and it's at a wavelength that can disrupt things. I discount completely that a radar can do it. And in 1947, there was a radar in New Mexico. There are two of them that operated at 3 gigahertz. It was developed during World War II and then perfected, and it was at White Sands, and it was used to track the V2 rockets, what is also known as the A4. The Germans know it as the A4. We know it as the V2. They were using it to track, and on YouTube, you can look and see those radars in operation, because some of the historic White Sands videos about the tests of the V2 rockets actually show the radar in operation, the radar we're talking about. There are two of them. There could have been some of the radar in New Mexico at Roswell, near Roswell. The radar was designed to grade bomb precision drops. They'll track the aircraft like the B-29. They'll track the bomb that it releases and then grade how well the bombardier on the bomber was able to hit the target on the ground. That radar was used then. And you have Roswell Army Air Force Base with B-29s there that were equipped to deliver free fall atomic weapons. And it made sense that that radar was there. I don't know, but I do know that White Sands, they had at least two of those radars, so 3 gigahertz. The other thing about 3 gigahertz is that Dr. James McDonald, who was apparently committed, it's very interesting, near me, in fact, near where I live. He was found in what we know as a wash, it's a dry lake bed, because, we have dry rivers here for flooding since we have monsoons. And he was found underneath a bridge. And they said that it was don't know, but he did write that he did some analysis on the RB-47 reconnaissance aircraft. It had an electronic intelligence suite, and it could detect and record and track electromagnetic emissions. And that emission from the UFO being chased by the RB-47 operated at 2.995 and 3 gigahertz. right? There's that. So, there's a lot of 3 gigahertz is of interesting frequency related to the phenomena, particularly structured craft that can fly. So,
Okay.
is there some association with that? I don't know.
Alfredo Lissoni, who wrote a book about the Mussolini files with Pinotti, also uncovered real documents in the Italian archives confirming the reporting system for sightings in the 30s. He also uncovered a cryptic reference in a speech by Mussolini in 1941, whose content was never adequately understood until now. In the speech, the Duce said, quote, "It's more likely that the United States will be invaded by unknown but warlike inhabitants from the planet Mars who will come down from the starry space on unimaginable flying fortresses than from the soldiers of the Axis." End quote. As things began to go sour for Italy during the war, all the files from cabinet RS-33 were supposedly shipped to Nazi Germany, where they might have influenced the Italian aeronautical engineer Beluso, who worked with the Germans on creating a flying disc. But that is another story. For your Need to Know, this is Antonio Huneos.